This weekend is different. No Kansas City Chiefs on the field. Instead, they get to sit back, watch, and learn while the rest of the league battles it out. But what should they be focusing on? That's exactly what we're breaking down today. What's up, buddies? Welcome back. If you are new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We cover all AFC West news here on this channel. Now, this might be the best week of the year for a team aiming to play deep into the postseason. The Chiefs can finally take a breather, and that rest matters. But the real question is, what should they focus on during this break? How do they maximize this downtime? That's the focus of today's video. It's a time to watch, study, and learn. Sure, the coaching staff will have all the footage they need, but for the players, especially after this break, it's a reset. As they get back into rhythm this week, the focus should be clear. What can they gain from watching these games closely? When watching this weekend's games, the main focus is figuring out who Kansas City might face next. The most likely scenario seems to be a matchup involving either Houston or the Chargers, but of course, that could change depending on how the games play out. For Kansas City, it's about staying prepared for any opponent. They might not know exactly who they'll face until the games wrap up on Saturday or Sunday, but the advantage they have is experience. They've already faced every team in the playoff picture this year, so there's already film and firsthand knowledge of how each team operates. The challenge, though, is they've faced two of these teams twice already. That level of familiarity can be a double-edged sword. Beating a divisional opponent 3 times in one season is notoriously difficult, especially if the Chargers end up being the matchup. Adjustments will be key as teams evolve throughout the season. Injuries, shifting lineups, and evolving strategies all factor in. And Kansas City needs to focus on where these teams stand right now, not just how things looked in previous matchups. In the next segment, we'll dive into some of the major injury concerns around the league heading into Wild Card Weekend and how they could impact matchups. But before we have something very important to know, and that is, there's been a lot of activity behind the scenes for Kansas City. Coaches like Matt Nagy, Steve Spagnuolo, and Mike Borgonzi, along with the front office, have been drawing attention for open positions around the league. Yet despite the buzz, the focus remains on preparing for the postseason. Studying what other teams are doing and learning from their approaches also plays a role in the overall game plan. The situation with Steve Spagnuolo stands out. He's clearly a top-tier defensive coordinator who deserves credit for the job he's done. However, his last head coaching stint didn't go well, and that memory could make it tough for him to land another top job. To be fair, the circumstances back then were far from ideal, but it could still affect his chances. Now, Matt Nagy is another name that's come up, but I'd be pretty surprised if he lands a job this cycle. The offense hasn't been firing on all cylinders, even with Patrick Mahomes under center. So how much of that falls on Nagy? That's going to be a tough question for teams considering. Mike Borgonzi's situation is a bit different. He's reportedly in the mix for a general manager position, which makes sense given his role in building this roster. But from Kansas City's perspective, losing another key front office figure. The key for someone like Borgonzi, if he does get a shot as a GM, is ownership support. Will the team owner give him full control and trust his decisions? Or will they stay too involved? That's often the difference between a successful front office and a dysfunctional one. Plenty of owners want to be hands-on but simply lack the football expertise to make the right calls. A lot of times, ownership plays a bigger role than people realize, and not always for the better. Some owners get too involved in football decisions when they don't fully understand the game, which can make things more difficult for the entire organization. Beyond that, successful organizations need owners willing to spend, not just on star players, but also on the coaching staff. Sure, the head coach gets most of the spotlight, but it's the assistants who keep things running behind the scene. If ownership isn't willing to offer competitive pay to attract top-tier assistants, they risk losing out on quality coaching talent. And here's the thing. Assistant salaries don't count against the salary cap. It's an expense, but there's no financial limit on what a team can invest in coaching staff. Back to the bigger picture, there's a lot to take away from this weekend's games, both from press conferences and on the field. These matchups don't just determine who Kansas City could face next, but also shape the entire playoff landscape. As the schedule shakes out, it's looking likely that Kansas City's next game will be on Saturday, depending on how these matchups play out. All the AFC teams are in action right from the start, and the first game on the slate could be one of the most interesting. Chargers versus Texans. In my opinion, the Chargers are the better team here. They probably won't need to lean heavily on their play-action game or force the passing attack. Houston's run defense has struggled, so the Chargers should be able to control the ground game effectively. Houston is also dealing with key injuries, and losing Tank Dell in that game against Kansas City was a major blow. Without him, they're lacking the offensive weapons needed to stay competitive this week. CJ Stroud has also hit a bit of a rough patch lately. He hasn't been performing at the same high level he showed earlier in the season, which adds to the challenges Houston faces. For those reasons, I don't see the Chargers losing this one. They're in a better position across the board, and if they take care of business, that could very well set up a rematch with Kansas City in the next round. It wouldn't be surprising to see them take a cautious approach with their top players. Given how things went the last time they played the Chiefs, they'll likely want to keep their key playmakers fresh in case of a postseason rematch. Of course, with the Chargers, there's always that lingering possibility they could fall apart in a game they're expected to win. It's been a pattern for them in past playoff appearances. Whether that's been due to coaching, execution, or a combination of both, it's hard to ignore. They've got a new head coach this season, though, so maybe this time they can break the trend and finally take that next step. Switching over to another AFC matchup, Baltimore versus Pittsburgh, this one doesn't seem very close either. On paper, it looks like Baltimore should control this game. Pittsburgh's situation is tough. Mike Tomlin remains one of the best coaches in the league, but coaching alone can't carry a team. The roster just isn't built to compete right now. The struggles at quarterback, with a Kenny Pickett under center, and a lack of reliable receiving threats make it hard to see a path for Pittsburgh in this one. Meanwhile, Baltimore has been dominant. Between Lamar Jackson's dual threat ability and the way Derrick Henry has been running the ball, it's hard not to feel confident about their chances. Honestly, this one feels like it could get lopsided quickly. This game feels like a prime opportunity for Lamar Jackson to make a statement. One criticism he's faced throughout his career is the lack of consistent playoff success. He's picked up a win, but he hasn't put together a deep postseason run yet. Beating the Steelers would be a step in the right direction, but the real test would come next week, most likely against Buffalo. Now, moving on to Game 3, this one feels like it could be a wild card in the playoff picture. Denver's defense has been steadily improving. They made a statement against Kansas City recently and have shown they can generate consistent pressure up front. If they stay disciplined, that pass rush can be a serious factor. The concern, though, lies in the second level of their defense. The Broncos haven't shown the same strength in coverage deeper downfield, and that's what makes this game so intriguing. On paper, it might not seem close, but the way Denver's defense has been playing could keep it tighter than expected, which can make life tough on playoff-caliber offenses when they play disciplined football. The Broncos are going to bring everything they've got. This is their entire season on the line. Of course, every playoff team plays hard, but Denver's physical style makes them a unique challenge. Buffalo's defense has been inconsistent, while Denver's has been getting stronger. And on the offensive side, the Broncos have quietly started to find some rhythm. That balance makes this game more interesting than most expect. If Buffalo wins, it sets up a Ravens-Bills clash, which works out well for Kansas City in every way. The physical toll both teams would take could give the Chiefs a significant edge heading into the next round. That wraps up today's breakdown. The Chiefs may be off the field this weekend, but there's plenty to watch and learn as the playoff picture unfolds. What do you think the Chiefs should be focusing on during this break? Should they be more concerned about a rematch with the Chargers or a showdown with the Ravens? And which AFC team looks the most dangerous right now? Drop your predictions in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. If you're enjoying this kind of analysis, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss our updates on the Chiefs playoff run.